Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. We're up on the NFL Draft, which means that for 3 days and 3 nights, it will be wall-to-wall football for all of us. This guy goes sort of wall-to-wall football 365. Got to know him over a decade ago at the NFL Combine. He covers some nuances of the game that sometimes in season on a week-to-week basis become conversations between Luke Jones and I. Aaron Schatz covers all things football as Football Outsiders head and ESPN NFL analyst as well. You can find him at FO_A Schatz. That's SCHATZ. And he has a wonderful picture with Seth Meyers, and I hope he gets invited back on again soon. Aaron, what's going on, man? Happy off-season to you. I know that you guys are working on your preseason stuff for next year in an NFL way, and you sort of keep an eye on the draft, but it's not the focus of what your company does. But this is certainly an interesting time of the year for a place like the Ravens where they're trying to build an offense that maybe we haven't seen in the NFL. It's a little bit of a test tube experiment, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, the real test is going to be over the next couple of years to see how successful they are. It's not as much that they're building an offense that we haven't seen in the NFL as much as they're building an offense that is sort of, I guess, old school. It's old school in some ways and new school in others. I mean, the threat of the quarterback running is more new school, but the concentration on the run over the pass is very old school. And it honestly goes against a lot of what we know about the NFL and the primacy of the pass in the modern NFL.
Well, and I guess from an analytical standpoint, you can go back and say where football was when they were wearing leather helmets to where the AFL was and flicking the ball all over the place, and why the WAC was always, 55 to 49 games, and the slobber knocker, monsters of the Midway and all of that stuff, and what it's evolved into that the other teams are doing it the other way. It's an interesting thing to say everybody's passing but us. We're going to run when they're passing. That's a fascinating approach at any level, economically, in any sort of environment. I mean, baseball has its own analytical thing going on right now, but I would think that the reason football became pass happy was a bunch of nerds got in a room and decided moving the ball 8 yards, 10 yards, 12 yards in one play was just a lot more efficient than doing it in 3.
Well, shoot, you don't have to be a nerd with a math to know that. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that 8 and 10 is usually a lot more efficient than 3.
Hey, listen, I'm a guy that struggled with algebra too, just so you know. So all of this calculus and geometry, that's for guys like you, not me,
And here's the thing. I mean, this is what's tough about what the Ravens are trying to do, is that the most consistent, predictable thing in the NFL is pass offense. Right? The easiest thing to build and know that it's going to be good year after year is pass offense. Special teams is usually a lot more inconsistent. Defense is usually more inconsistent. The running game is less important. What really builds the quality teams is the passing game on offense. And the Ravens are sort of the opposite, right? They built their team around special teams and defense, and they've been surprisingly consistent. Compared to what usually teams are, the Ravens are surprisingly consistent on special teams and defense, and now they want to build their offense much more about the run, even though everything shows that the pass is almost always going to be more efficient than the run. The sort of asterisk on this is that I think that, based on what we know, Lamar Jackson showed promise in college as a passer, and I think that you can develop a passing offense around him. I don't think you have to develop a running offense around him, but that does seem to be what they want to do with this run-first offense.
Well, in the modern era, there's a financial component of this, too. You say the Ravens always focused on defense and special teams. Well, we have the best kicker in the world. I always like to point that out, and a damn fine punter in a Hall of pretty good in Sam Cook. But the financial part of this was, we're going to pay our quarterback at top of the market and then surround him with remnants while the Ray Lewis, Suggs, the defense, nada. There was always a lot of money being spent on that side of the ball. I think there's an analytical part of baseball that might be useful here to get the most tread out of the tire in the first contract. That is sort of caught up to being a football thought. And to your thought about everything being built around passing, that is the one thing you do. You invest in a quarterback for 4 years or whatever. If you have a real quarterback, when you're drafting him, you're spending money on it. So everything you're doing is being built around that person. There's really no other person on the football field you would build the whole thing around. And in the Ravens' case, they spent the money on that person in Flacco and then didn't do the rest of it around him. Now they're trying to do it on the cheap, right? We've got a cheap quarterback. How can we then spend our money in other ways? At least that's the way it feels locally to me as to how they're going to try to build this over the next 3 or 4 years where they don't have to pay a quarterback $25 million.
Right. The difference is that most teams that are building around a young quarterback are still building a pass offense around that young quarterback, right? I mean, most teams with a young quarterback, they're still trusting that young quarterback to run a pass-first offense. The Rams are a pass-first offense. The Eagles are a pass-first offense. Also, at least for this, I mean, for the third and fourth years of his contract with Jackson, they've got the quarterback on the cheap. But this year, they've got over $20 million in dead money in offense between Flacco and Michael Crabtree. So, they may not be paying Lamar Jackson much, but they're still paying the quarterback position a lot of money because they've got all that dead cap money wrapped up in Flacco.
Aaron Schatz is our guest. He is FO_A Schatz. He's the head of Football Outsiders, a great conversationalist and certainly a great follow in football season for Football Outsiders and getting the preseason together and Joe Flacco changing helmets. I know we had a long chat at the Super Bowl in Atlanta, and it feels like a long time ago, but it was 3 months ago, I guess, and we did not know where Joe Flacco was going to land. I've had a couple of people, a handful of people say to me, I think Joe Flacco will play in a playoff game, quarterback in a playoff game as a member of the Denver Broncos. I've had no one jump on the table for Lamar Jackson as being a Super Bowl champion here, but a few people believe that Flacco's landed in a good spot for him. Some thoughts about the tread left on his tire. Aaron, you go back to the first month of last year and what the Ravens did, winning 3 out of 4, winning in Pittsburgh decisively, Flacco throwing for 360 yards. There were a lot of things going right early last year for the Ravens that may say that Joe Flacco might be a pretty good quarterback the next couple of years in Denver. Not elite or whatever, but pretty good.
Well, his performance was above average by our numbers, I believe, for the first half of last year, but that's very different from 2017, 2016, and it looks like a little bit of a kind of fluky blip. I mean, if you ask me who's more likely to go to the playoffs over the next 2 to 3 years between Jackson or Flacco, I think the answer is the Ravens and Jackson pretty clearly. They have more talent right now on the defensive side of the ball. They're in an easier division. And like I said, I think Jackson showed promise as a passer at Louisville. I think the likelihood that Jackson is going to be better than what he was last year as a passer is a lot stronger than the likelihood that Flacco will continue to be what he was in the first few weeks of last year as a passer. Now, that being said, I think people sort of misread what happened to the Ravens last year. Based on our numbers, their offense actually got worse in the second half of the season when the team improved. They were 12th in offense in the first half of the year, 21st in the second half of the year in our DVOA ratings, which is our main efficiency rating. It's that the defense went from 6th to 2nd that made the team better in the second half of the year. The improvement and the playoff run for the Ravens last year was driven by the defense, not by the running offense.
Going to be a very difficult thing to predict what the Ravens will be this year, certainly on defense, where I don't think they were mentally or emotionally prepared to move on from Suggs. They just thought he was staying. I think Mosley, they had done a lot of praying on that and thinking, well, maybe somebody will come and overwhelm him. And the Jets did, inevitably. But this sort of a heart transplant with Weddle and Suggs and Mosley not being in the room. Aaron, I've been in that room the last couple of years. Wins, losses, Wembley, Los Angeles, all over the place. That's the heart and soul. Those are the jerseys the fans are wearing. We're going to see a whole new football team. We're going to need a little bit of a scorecard, which I think makes the draft even more important for the Ravens next week to make sure that they're getting players that are going to be able to play.
I will say this. Listen, I am not an expert on chemistry and how long it takes chemistry to coalesce, but certainly all stories suggest that Earl Thomas is a leader of the same caliber as the men you just mentioned and probably will take over the leadership of the locker room for the Ravens. So it's not like there's suddenly a team without defensive leaders. Replacing Mosley in the middle, that is going to be difficult. But the leadership-wise, I would think between Thomas and between, a lot of veteran cornerbacks in that locker room, the really deep cornerback group, I would think they've got the leadership thing set.
For Wink and for what he's trying to do and for what you said, moving from 6th to 2nd, a lot of that was about the offense playing keep away. The offense would take the ball 6, 8, 9 minutes, move the ball, sometimes score, sometimes get field, whatever it would be, but they were chewing up clock and the defense was 3 and out and very well rested, and it did play to the Weddle and the Suggs and Jimmy Smith, sort of on the back 9 to keep them off the field 80 snaps a game like they're running around against the Carolina Panthers back in October.
Well, I don't know how many fewer snaps. I'd have to look at how many fewer snaps that defense played in the second half of the year compared to the first half of the year. But, we've never actually done research that shows that a team that having more of a running offense actually helps the defense. I know that that's the way people feel that it is, but we've never been able to do research that actually shows that that's how it is. I tend to be a believer that the offense and defense are more separate than most people think. And I do think it was the defense improving that drove that team in the second half of last year. It was not the offense. Even though they moved to the more run-focused offense, I don't think that really improved things. I think that what was winning games for them was defense and special teams, which is what generally has won games for the Ravens whenever they've been successful over the last few years.
Aaron Schatz joining us here. Tell everybody what you do at Football Outsiders, because I'll just mangle it all up. I figure you have your elevator speech and thesis statement together better than I do.
Well, it's stat analysis, but it's drilling down play-by-play, trying to think like coaches in terms of situational football, right? The idea that the point of every play is different based on what the down and distance is and where you are on the field. You can't have a 30-yard touchdown pass when you're in the red zone and there's only 20 yards to go, that kind of thing. So we judge every play individually based on the down and distance, based on the situation. We adjust based on opponent, and that's how we mainly look at numbers. We also do a lot of looking at things like offensive line play. We do look at translations from college to the pros for certain positions. We've got some charting stuff with our partners at Sports Info Solutions. We just try to look at the numbers in a lot of different ways, but to tie it into how football actually works rather than just looking at numbers in a spreadsheet on their own,
Well, and one of those things you'd say, how do coaches react? Well, how do coaches react to Lamar Jackson? Clearly they were reacting differently the second time around for the San Diego Chargers and what they baked up for him in Baltimore in stopping things. It really is a league of adjustments, and it's guys like you looking at parts of the nuances of that. But, when you go back and you look at what the Chargers did and what you learned the second time around in even playing an unorthodox offense, that there is a little bit of a solution if you have the right athletes and you're willing to adjust to some degree.
Yeah, yeah. I don't have much of a response to that.
I don't know if that it works every week, but I guess part of that is that the Ravens are trying to do this thing that no one else is doing, how defensive coordinators are going, how every Bill Belichick's going to go back into the laboratory and cook it up.
It's the film chess game, right? Now everybody's going to go look at what the Chargers did to them in the playoffs. So now the Ravens have to figure out how to stop the thing the Chargers did to them, because other teams will try to do that. Now, of course, you have to ask, do other teams have the personnel to do that? Do they have the fast defensive backs to kind of like spread out on the perimeter and stop the runs from Lamar Jackson from running? I don't think, the Bengals have the personnel to do that. Do the other teams in the division have the personnel to do that? Do the other teams that they're playing, that they're going to be challenging for a playoff spot, have the defense to do that? But that's the strategy now. And so now the Ravens do have to come up with an offensive strategy that counters that defensive strategy.
I don't think we gave the Patriots love when we were together in Atlanta, because I don't think I let you. I think we were talking a lot about Lamar and the Ravens and all that kind of stuff. But as you sit in that market as a former Providence Club DJ, what kind of tunes did you spin, by the way, just so I know?
It was alternative night back in the mid-'90s. So lots of Beastie Boys and random hip-hoppy type things like Primitive Radio Gods.
Disco. I like it. All right. That's good to know. I mean, not disco literally, but disco figuratively. The whole Belichick-Brady thing from where you sit as you put together another Football Outsiders almanac where they did it again. They've outsmarted everyone. You talk about all the nuance of the game and all the adjustment and film study that the Patriots and Bill Belichick and Tom Brady continue to do it at the highest level, and everyone's still chasing them. We can sit here and talk about the other 31 teams and their hopes and aspirations and how the Browns are going to be the best team in the league this year and all that, but they're still all chasing the Patriots.
Yeah, I do have a feeling that the dynasty is over. I have a feeling last year was the last win. I mean, it doesn't mean they're not going to win their division this year and go to the playoffs. They will. But I think that was the last Super Bowl championship. There are a lot of holes on that team that have opened up in this offseason. That being said, nobody can counter Bill Belichick as a game planner. He took a defense that was essentially league average, and he used it to completely shut down one of the top offenses in the league in the Super Bowl. It was a really remarkable game plan. That's why the Super Bowl was kind of boring to watch live, but it's a fantastic game to watch for a football geek on tape because you can watch just how the game plan, it's a lot easier to sort of see how the game plan works and progresses when you're watching it on film rather than like watching it live. And that's really what the Super Bowl was good for last year.
Well, it was good for something. I mean, wrong outcome on our side, but stirring up another offseason and draft and all that good stuff. The football. When does your almanac hit the streets?
Usually comes out in mid-July. We're working on it right up until the time it comes out. So the next 3 months will be pretty hardcore. We'll do all our team projections. We'll do all our Kubiak fantasy player projections. We'll be writing the whole book, and then it comes out in mid-July.
Who's your favorite player in the NFL right now to study, Aaron?
Oh, I mean, listen. My favorite player to root for has always been Gronk, but unfortunately, there's no more Gronk to enjoy because I always liked the way that he countered the Patriots' really dry style by having a lot of fun. I'm a great believer in having fun in the league. I don't know. My favorite.
That's the Beastie Boys in you, by the way. I think that's.
Yeah, I'll tell you who I think is really underappreciated.
Sure.
And that's Michael Thomas from the Saints. He is a phenomenal player. His catch rate last year, despite being not like a slot receiver, but a receiver who runs normal routes, deep routes, like a mix of short and deep routes, for him to have an 85% catch rate last year was just absurd. And I think he's very underappreciated. He's been one of the top 6 or 7 receivers in the league since he was a rookie. And nobody really talks about him in the same breath that they talk about guys like Odell Beckham and Julio Jones and DeAndre Hopkins. And they should talk about Thomas in the same area.
He's got a pretty good quarterback, too, right? Nobody talks about Breeze.
He does have a pretty good quarterback. That's obviously a help. But you know what? Julio has a pretty good quarterback, too. So a lot of good receivers have good quarterbacks. They tend to work together. I just think Michael Thomas is a guy that's just not talked about enough how good he is.
I hope we have a good quarterback. That's all I got right now. I hope we do.
I think Lamar Jackson has more promise as a passer than they were willing to kind of give him an opening to do last year. And with him into his second and third season, you're going to need to see him pass more because that's how you build. I'm saying that is how you build a good offense in the NFL. It's not through the run. That said, they also have to get him receivers. And I mean, it's kind of amazing how many teams have these really destitute receiving depth charts right now, but the Ravens depth chart looks pretty empty. I mean, you've got Snead and Chris Moore, and then a couple of rookies who didn't play as rookies, and Seth Roberts. They really need they need a number one wide receiver badly. Like that, if I were them, that would be my number one goal for the first round of this draft.
We've been saying that here for most of the century, literally. Steve Smith on the back nine, Derek Mason on the back nine, Bolden and gifted away, and still hard feelings around here about all of that. But the misses on Perryman and Travis Taylor, and the road is long here.
Perriman was such a shame. We really liked him coming out of college. He did really well in our projection system, and just never happened for him.
Yeah, we noticed. That's why we are where we are, and we're still talking about wide receivers. Aaron Schatz can be found FO_A Schatz. He's the head of Football Outsiders, an ESPN NFL analyst, and all-around good dude and guest. Great to have you on. Keep enjoying your spring, and keep spinning the Beastie Boys. I'll check back in with you at some point before the season starts next year.
Sounds good, man.
Football Outsiders Almanac comes out in July. Find out more at footballoutsiders.com. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world, from wherever you're sitting. The kids call it podcasting. We call it the buyatoyota.com audio vault. The morning newspaper ships digitally to your email inbox right around 7:01 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, as well as our friends at the Maryland Jockey Club, where they're racing down to Laurel this week, and we're getting ready for the Triple Crown. And we're going to be talking about Pimlico and Preakness and Laurel and all of that stuff here into next month. Last but never least, any breaking news? We'll have plenty of that next week at the NFL Draft. Gets to you first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford Security Boulevard. Dennis Colatzos will be here this Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home and getting you ready for the weekend. It's the SSV on WNST and our WNST Tech Service. I am Nestor. I'm a very available individual. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Anywhere your mobile device goes, we are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.